Okay, this is part 5 of the reorder. Another thing, of course, I forgot to mention. This is why I feel like I need a script or something and not just do this off the cuff because I just forget things. Um, as I mentioned in the Flash Volume 3, Jeff Johns Volume 3 omnibus, there is tie-ins to an event called Blackest Night. I was just reading Blackest Night as well because while it's mostly a Green Lantern event, it is a big DC event. It's a really good story, and it's once again written by Jeff Johns. But Barry is kind of the co-star of this event. Like, Barry plays a big part in this, and also it does make references to stuff that happens in Flash Rebirth and all that. So I would say in between when you're reading the Flash by Jeff Johns Volume 3, I say probably after Rebirth, I say go to this and read that along with the tie-ins and all that. So, yeah. But now, going back to the New 52, we now have, first we have this event here. This was another event that took place. It's the first event in New 52, which was Forever Evil. And this is the tie-in for it. Forever Evil is actually a really cool event that basically involves the crime syndicate coming from Earth 3 to Earth 1 and sending the Justice League away, and them taking over the city and having all the villains wreak havoc. Of course, though, there are certain villains that don't like what the crime syndicate is doing. In my opinion, the best rogues gallery in all of comics, which is the Rogues. The Rogues, and they are rebelling in Rogues Rebellion. So this collects Rogues Rebellion, a miniseries that collects 1 through 6, as well as the Flash 23.2, which is basically the intro or the start of it. Just to explain real quick why it's point 2, because around Forever Evil, around issue 23 of all the DC series, DC had this month called Villains Month, where they stopped all the issues for a month, and they released these point issues, where they had issues focusing on the different villains as opposed to the hero for the month. And in the case of the Flash, there were 3 of them released. And I believe all 3 of them are in here. They're all in the Omni. Like, Flash, I know definitely Flash 23.3 is in there, because 23.3 is the Reverse Flash issue, which is part of the Reverse Flash arc. 23.1, the Garage issue, should be in there as well. And then, of course, it's this 23.2. Let me see if I got that right. Oh, no, this is 23.3. I'm sorry. 23.2 was the Reverse issue. Sorry about that. Now we go into... Take some of these guys out here. So first we have this one here. This is the Flash Volume 5, History Lessons. This is written by Brian Buccellato. This is kind of more like a filler or a stopgap in between the 2 runs. So, I mean, this got some cool stories in there. It's got the annual in there, the second annual in there, which is also collected in the Flash Omni. But yeah, if you want to check that out, there's some interesting stuff in there. Then we get to the next significant... Whoop. Then we get to the next significant run, which is the run by Robert Venditti, who, while I think had a phenomenal run on Green Lantern, which I have most of it here. He had a phenomenal run on Green Lantern. Flash, not so much. This run is fine. I mean, it's probably, of the Barry Return era, this is probably the worst of it. But, yeah. I mean, there is still some good stuff in there. Like, specifically, as you see this guy right here. This is basically, as I like to call, again, another Spider-Man comparison, I like to call this guy Superior Flash, which is basically what they were doing. Where this is Barry from another timeline, who has some stuff happen to him, and he ends up coming back, and he sends Barry into the Savage Speed Force, and because of that, he ends up trying to take over Barry's life. Which is not cool, man. Come on. And then this is volume 7, which continues that story as well. So while our superior Flash over here is taking over Barry's life, Barry is stuck in something called the Savage World, or the Savage Speed Force, which is like a whole nother world, like a jungle, almost like a Jurassic Park type thing. And so he's got to like get out of there as well. And this also introduces the new Wally West. At the time, he was the Wally West. Later on, Jeff Johns would come in and fix that. But eventually make him into Wallace West. But yes, this is the introduction of Wallace West, aka the next Kid Flash, and at the time, the only Wally West, but we'll see how they fix that later on. And then this is Volume 8, Zoom, which to me is the all-time worst Reverse Flash story. I do not like this story at all. It's really not that great, and I especially hate this right here. I hate this costume. I don't like this costume at all. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't like the yellow eyes. They make him look evil. And I think with the red symbol here, I think what they were trying to do is they were trying to match up the show, where the show in the first season, he had the red emblem. The problem was, though, is that by the time this came out, the show was on season 2 where he had the white emblem. So it just made it seem like pointless synergy. And then we get to Volume 9, which is a pretty cool story where the Rogues end up being deputized. Funny thing about that is that they end up doing this again most recently, in the most recent one, in Jeremy Adams' run. And they even do mention it like, wait, haven't we done this before? It's like, yeah, but it's a little different. But still, this is a pretty cool story. It's cool to see the Rogues being deputized by the Flash. Or not by the Flash, by the Central City Police Department. So yeah, it's pretty cool story. And then we have another reboot. This is DC Rebirth, which is a whole another reboot and a really great era of comics. But specifically, this story I have in my collection specifically because it really is a Flash story, because a certain someone comes back who hasn't been seen in a while. And that is, of course, Wally West. Our Wally West, redheaded, good old Wally West, is now back. Which is also now, and this is the story where they explained the two different Wallys, where at first they tried to reboot him as like, hey, now he's this light black kid. And everyone's like, no, and we're not trying to be racist, but no, that's not Wally. But then Jeff Johns, now what he does is he makes Wally and Wallace cousins who just happen to have the same name. And so Wally is now back, and Wallace ends up becoming the new Kid Flash. Also, actually just want to show this as well, too. I'm sure most people know this image, but this is a great image at the end, because the whole thing that happens and what is explained is that where Wally has been all these years, or all this time during New 52, Wally was stuck in the Speed Force, but he was also not just stuck, but he was completely forgotten about. No one knew who he was. And I'll explain later why that is, or how that happens. But basically what ends up happening, though, is he says goodbye to Barry, thanks him for the great life. Every second was a gift, which is going to be significant in the next run. Remember that line. And Barry does remember. And he brings Wally back. Wally West is now back. And this is a great image. I love this image. So good. So great. So now Wally West is back. While he's not the main Flash again, it's still Barry. But Wally is now back. And that's good. Which now leads into two significant stories, because now this is part of the new reboot. First, we're going to go into this. This is now the Flash Volume 1, Lightning Strikes Twice. This is the start of the run by Joshua Williamson. This is my all-time favorite comic run. This is my all-time favorite Flash run. I love this run to death. We're going to be on this for a while, so just buckle up. But yes, this is the start of it. Ironically enough, though, the first issue that starts this is called Flash Rebirth. Not to be confused with the one from 2009, but yes, the Flash Rebirth. This is what starts this new era. But also, before we get more back into Joshua Williamson's run, I got this just to add this. This is Titans, Volume 1, The Return of Wally West. So after Wally comes back from the Speed Force, this is where... so Wally is back, and Barry and Wally kind of more or less go off to do their own thing. Wally basically has to figure out his life now, because stuff has happened to him. Like, everyone's forgotten who he is. His kids are God only knows where. Linda has no idea who he is. He ends up going back with the Titans, and he ends up being able to restore their memories, and now everyone remembers him. But what does happen, and the main reason why this happens to him and why everyone forgets him, is because not only was he sent away to the Speed Force by Dr. Manhattan, which we learn later on in Doomsday Clock, but the reason why everyone forgot who he was because of, in my opinion, his arch nemesis, Abracadabra. Abracadabra was the one who erased everyone's memory of him. Because, and the reason why I think he's his arch nemesis, like, in the case of Barry, his arch nemesis is Fawn. Duh. But with Wally, because Mark Waid used Abracadabra a lot, and he really, I think at one point, it got to the point where even though he started as a Barry villain, he really, really did hate Wally. And he usually gave Wally a lot of crap. And it was the ultimate revenge for him to get rid of him and have people completely forget who he is. And by the way, Abracadabra's Dan DiDio. But yeah. But that's Titans. And then we go now into more of the Williamson Flash stuff. So I'm just going to go through these quick. Because again, there's a lot of volumes here. I don't have omnis for them yet. Hopefully DC will do them soon. But yeah, this is a long run. This is a 100-issue run. So yeah, we have Volume 2, Speed of Darkness. Volume 3, Rogues Reloaded. This collects Flash 14 from 20. Then we gotta take another pit stop. This is the Flash / Batman, the Button. And what's cool about this is that this is a cool crossover with the two of them, which was kind of supposed to be like a little like in between appetizer before Doomsday Clock showed up. And then, of course, we all know what happened with Doomsday Clock and all the crazy stuff in Metal. But yeah, I still like to read this story, even though Tom King kind of really fucked up the story later in this Batman run. But in the case of Flash, it's a pretty cool story. And actually it is a cool Batman story as well, because one of the cool moments that happens in it is, let's see here. Well, actually, this is a little sad. I remember when I first saw this, this made me really upset. So this is at the end of Flashpoint. The Flashpoint Batman, a.k.a. Thomas Wade, wrote a letter to Bruce to kind of like comfort him, but also to basically suggest like, hey, you don't have to be Batman, it's okay. But he wrote that as a way to kind of like say goodbye to him, and Bruce took that as like a way of like, oh wow, he still has some kind of link to his father. And this piece of shit Fawn rips it all up. I love Fawn, but I also hate Fawn. And this was horrible to me. I felt really bad for Batman here when this happened. But another cool moment, though, because of this, though, even though the letter gets ripped up, he does actually end up getting to meet the Flashpoint Batman. So he actually does get to have a little fun team up with his dad. And that's what it all should have been, Tom King. Anyway, let's get to the next batch of Flash stuff. Alright, wow, this is going to be a fun cleanup. So this is Volume 4, Running Scared. This is now... So now Fawn is basically officially back now. The real Fawn is back. Okay, because another thing that happened is in between that other Zoom story I told you about, that New 52 version of him, that version of him was so bad because he doesn't remember Flashpoint, he doesn't remember Flash Rebirth or any of that. This is supposed to be a whole new version of him. Joshua Williamson more or less basically just killed off that version and brought this Fawn back, our Fawn from pre New 52. Like, literally just happens where you see the other Zoom's body just explode in lightning, and then it's like, I'm back now, bitches. Eobard Fawn's back. So again, this collects 23 through 27, and this is a really good story. Okay, and then this leads into Negative. Some of the fans of the show may know this as well, because this is the introduction of Bloodwork, who only had this story, but they end up using him on the show in season 6 and became one of the most popular villains, and really was a great story on the show. But yeah, he's used in this as well. This is where he was introduced. This collects Flash 28 through 32, as well as a story from the DC Holiday Special, which I like. It's kind of cute. Yeah. This is Volume 6, Cold Day in Hell. This collects Flash 34 through 38 and annual number 1. This is Perfect Storm. This is another great story because it has all the new Flash family team up, or at least we get them for a bit, which also has another character who I forgot to mention, who's introduced in Volume 1. Volume 1 is the debut of the character known as Godspeed, who more or less, and I really like this as also like a really big Jason Todd fan. He's more or less basically the Jason Todd of the Flash family. Like, he's kind of like the anti-hero, and I think that's kind of cool. So yeah, so we have this. And then we probably get to the most well-known story of his run, which is Flash Form. This is basically a visual representation of the Flash fan base. Yeah, I mean, we're a good fan base, but also when it comes to the Wally Berry debates, this is basically a perfect visual representation of it. But yeah, this is a really, really great story. Phenomenal art by Howard Porter. Yeah, this collects the Flash 46 through 51 and the Flash Annual number 1. I mean, well, there's more to the Flash, because Flash Annual 1 is collected. It's basically, the Flash Annual, the first annual is split into two. They split it between these two collections. I mean, in Volume 6, you had the Wally story, and then in this has the story which brings back a familiar Wally West villain that was in the Jeff Johns run. Okay. Then we go into Volume 9, which is the Reckoning of the Forces. This starts the whole Force stuff, which the show just butchered horribly, but the comics I love. I love the Forces in the comics. This is really good. And also, this is a really good Heatwave story, as you can see here. Heatwave's here. Really good story. Introduces the new Forces. The Forces basically end up happening at the end of Flash War, where Wally and Barry run so fast, Wally specifically, that all these new forces get unleashed. So now, besides the Speed Force, there's the Straight Force, the Sage Force, the Psych Force. Yeah. And then we have Force Quest, which is one of my favorite stories in this entire run. And one of the reasons I love it is because it kind of takes Flash out of his element for a bit. Like, we actually get him out of Central City for a bit. So he's going off to, like, find it. He's going off on these quests to kind of find out more about these new forces, and Iris ends up going with him, and it's really cool. Like, he ends up going to another country for a bit, so he's kind of more in like a jungle like type area for a while. I mean, he's been in the jungle before, obviously, with all the Gorilla Grodd stuff, but it's cool. He's in like more like a Middle East marketplace kind of town, and yeah, it's a really, really cool story. Then we have the Flash, the Greatest Trick of All, which brings back the original Trickster, aka Mr. James Jesse. And for a while we had Axel, who was the younger Trickster. James was reformed for a bit, but that reform didn't last forever, and at one point he does end up coming back, and now this is his way of coming back. And what's kind of cool, what I like about this too, is that Johns in his run did these kind of one-shot stories that were basically supposed to be origins for the Rogues. Like, he did it, like, every maybe, like, 5 or 6 issues. He would do, like, a new one where he did one for Mirror Master, he did one for Captain Cold. And I like that Williamson kind of continued that tradition with doing one for Trickster, because we never got one for him. So, yeah. Then we take a bit of a detour for a bit. There's a lot that happens to to poor Wally. There's another event. I don't have it because I refuse to own it. But there's an event called Heroes in Crisis. Where, Wally's character gets assassinated, basically. It's not good stuff happens to Wally. And thankfully, though, since then, the story came out a few years ago now, but since then, other writers have basically retconned it, and it no longer affects Wally, but we're still going with the time where this was still going on. So, this is a story called Flash Forward. This was kind of supposed to be Wally's quote-unquote redemption, and it is a pretty cool story because one of the significant things that happens here is this brings back his kids. So, we always get that. But then going back now to the main Williamson run, we get one of my other favorites. This is Flash Year 1. This is basically Williamson making his own attempt on doing a Flash Year 1. And what I like about it, which I think is cool, is that he does it in the vein or kind of like in the style of Batman Year 1, where he actually has it go throughout the year. And you'll actually see, like, well, now it's October, now it's September. And it's just like a 6-issue series that goes through, like, his origin. And what I like about it, too, is that it homages the original Showcase number 4. So in the case of Showcase number 4, his first ever story, the first ever villain he fought was the Turtle, and that's who the villain is in this story. And also what's kind of cool about it is that while it is an origin, and it's kind of like it's kind of like a pause on his run, it also is kind of significant for his run because stuff that gets brought up in this story ends up coming back in his run later. Which is in here in Death in the Speed Force, which in my opinion has one of the coolest retcons and just makes Fawn so much of a bastard villain. Where, I mean, I won't get too much into it, but yeah, let's just say, like, if you read the original Jeff Johns stuff, something does happen here that changes a certain villain's motive, and again, just makes Fawn more of a prick. Fawn is my all-time favorite villain. I love the guy. Then we get to Rogue's Raid, which is a really interesting story because this took place around when DC was doing this thing called Year of the Villain. Not really like Forever Evil, but this was kind of like what Scott Snyder was doing, and one of the things that happened in it is Lex Luthor got all this power, and was going around to all the different villains in the DC universe and was basically like, hey, I'll grant you your one wish or whatever. And in the case of Captain Cold, Cole wanted the Rogues to finally take over and be more powered up and all that, which they were originally in New 52, but now they're more powered up here. And they actually end up taking over Central City for a good while in this story. And also what happens too with Barry is Barry's Speed Force glitches for a bit after what happens in the last arc, in the Death of the Speed Force arc. But yeah, Rogues actually end up winning for a bit. And then this story, The Flash Age, this introduces a new villain called Paradox. Which, he's a cool villain, and it's a really cool story. This, though, has one of my favorite moments. It's really sad, and it's a really sad moment, but it's kind of cool, too. Well, not cool. It's a very sad moment. Because, just to get a little personal here, one of the reasons why I like Barry Allen so much, or one of the reasons I relate to him, is the death of his mother. And I lost my mother at a young age, too. So I kind of relate to Barry in that way, and that's one of the reasons why I really do like him and why he's one of my all-time favorite, why he is my favorite comic book character. But, so there's a scene in here where Barry has to get Fawn. He needs Fawn's help to team up to take down this guy. What happens, though, is that, of course, he has to go for time to find Fawn, because Fawn at one point ends up getting killed by Iris earlier in our story. the only place that he'll know definitely where Fawn is in the timeline, of course, is the night his mother is murdered. So there's a scene in here where basically he goes to his house and basically has to wait Fawn out, and obviously not to screw up the timeline or anything. He basically has to wait out for Fawn, and he just has to listen to his mother being murdered, and it's fucked up. It's really bad. And then, of course, because this is a story that brings Fawn back, this leads into Finish Line, which is the end of Joshua Williams' run. And it's such a great story, and this finally brings back all the Flash family, because the Flash family were gone for a while. I mean, they started to come back spread out throughout Williamson's run, but during the New 52, it was basically just Barry, and then we had the new Wally, we had Wallace, but yeah, Jay was gone, Bart was gone, Max was gone. This was their way of bring everyone back, and this was the way to close out his run, and this was really, really fucking cool. Such a great story. And then we get to the current one. We're finally done. This is volume 16, Wally West Returns, which, because one of the things that's cool about Williamson's run is Williamson more or less basically finished the story for Barry that was started back in Flash Rebirth, where he basically finally forgave Fawn for killing his mother. And he was no longer haunted by the ghost of his mother's past. And he was able to move on from that. And I think it was a good way for him to more or less give the mantle back to Wally, which is basically what happens here. And Wally is now the main Flash again. This is what currently is going on in the main DC right now, in the main DC universe. Wally West is now the main Flash again. While Barry does something cool for a bit, where Barry ends up joining a team of other superheroes from other Earths called the Justice League Incarnate, and Barry is the Earth 1 representative. And what Barry is doing is Barry is basically going to different parts of the multiverse and exploring them and studying them and seeing how these heroes are different from others and all that, while also teaming up with this other Justice League to deal with other problems that happen outside of Earth 1 and in the multiverse. But as far as Earth 1 goes, Wally West is our main Earth 1 Flash again. So this is volume 16, Wally West Returns. And then this is the latest trade we have, which is Eclipsed. This is probably my least favorite arc of the run so far, but this is written now by Jeremy Adams, Joshua Williamson's done. Jeremy Adams, though, really, really good run. He's had some good runs. This is probably my least favorite arc, but the next art that's going to come out soon and the first art, the Wally West Returns, really, really good stuff. And I like what he's doing with Wally. All the Heroes in Crisis stuff is done. Wally's basically back to normal. The family's back. It's a very wholesome, very fun book. And one of the things I like about this one, too, is that this has an issue that's very meta. And it's almost like you're basically helping out the Flash in his journey. It breaks the fourth wall, and he's actually talking to you, the reader, and you have to help him out. It's really cool. But, yeah, that's it. Now I got to clean all this stuff up. But, yep, that's the entire Flash run. And hopefully you guys enjoy this. I know I basically went a half hour now because I figured instead of doing it in multiple parts, I figured I'd just finish it this way. But, yeah, that's the Flash run and the Flash read order. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Okay, see you later. Bye.